Pochettino calls for experience this summer. Today, my friends, we're here to discuss the latest club news surrounding Pochettino's thoughts for the future, as well as some incredible FFP hope boosts. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to catch me later tonight for this evening's match review. Fingers crossed we get a win against Everton. So my friends, only hit this like button if you feel confident that we are set to get a home win against Everton tonight. Hope you guys enjoy, and without wasting any more time, so let's start things off and we discuss the latest club account news, because over the weekend our accounts for last year did come out and there were some very interesting figures and numbers worth discussing. Now, one of the biggest stories of the weekend was that it was revealed that we had essentially sold 2 hotels up to the tune of 76.3 million towards BlueLionsTV Properties Limited, which is a subsidiary of BlueLionsTV Limited. And essentially this is a loophole, another loophole we're taking advantage of, which pushes us in the right direction, of course, to comply with profit and sustainability rules for this season. Now, without this sale, I mean, our losses would have been even bigger, because last year we recorded losses of around 90.1 million pre-tax. Now, this loophole isn't something new that's been created out of thin air. Similar things were done in the Championship with clubs such as Sheffield Wednesday and Birmingham City having done similar things. However, that loophole was closed off by the EFL. Now, the Premier League never technically closed off this loophole at all, because this never went to vote. So this is why the club feel very confident that they are complying with profit and sustainability rules, because they even ran this by the Premier League first. As we know, under this new ownership, we are happy to take advantages of loopholes that we see, and it does really show their incredible business acumen and their awareness. We're essentially, we're using one club's company account to sell within another company account. And I don't know how many company accounts we have. Obviously, we sold the hotels to BlueLionsTV Properties Limited, and they fall under BlueLionsTV, and with the ultimate end boss holding company being BlueLionsTV Investment Holdings, which obviously is situated in the Cayman Islands. And I think it's another reminder that by the time we as the fans hear about news like this, it's already old news. Let's not pretend that when Bowley and Co and Clear Lake Capital decided to buy the club from Roman, these are the discussions that were being had between them, lawyers, executives, and all the right type of business people. It's not as if this is something that came out from nowhere and took everyone by surprise. I mean, they've been working actively on finding the right ways around these issues. But to continue on by discussing some of the figures that came out from last year's accounts, obviously wages rose from 340 million to 404 million, so a 64 million rise. Obviously, we spent a further 454.1 million on players after spending 745.2 million last year. And obviously this means that amortization costs went up from 162.5 million to 205 million. Obviously the big purchases of players like Caicedo, of course, naturally those figures are going to rise. We're getting closer and closer to the 30th of June. Are we starting to lose hope? Well, it seems like this is not the case. Absolutely not. And there are some positive, of course, news to discuss. Obviously, we're set to receive around 28 million for sure now for the sale of LOOPHOLE, because right now, technically Newcastle can't finish below 14th place. And that was the league position they had to get above to activate the clause in this deal. So that's going to help. Another interesting piece of news too. It seems like we deferred a lot of payments from sales last summer. So the sales of guys like Mason Mount, Havertz, etc., where these guys went for like fixed fees plus additional fees on top. It seems like we defer those additional fees to accept them for this year. So that's definitely going to go a long way in helping us. And obviously the big stuff being the sale of homegrown players. Now, of course, it's quite controversial, and my thoughts, the fact that we've got to this position where, to really safeguard ourselves, have the flexibility now, not to even safeguard ourselves with profit and sustainability rules, but to give us a bigger transfer budget to reinvest into the team this summer. That's why we're selling them, because, if you can raise around 100 million in pure profit for Conor Gallagher, Trevor Chalobah, Amando Broja, plus others as well. I mean, imagine how you're amortizing that type of profit, right? I mean, you could probably buy players up to 3-4 times that value. And it does seem like we definitely need to bring in some experience into the team for next season. And I'm going to continue this particular point on for the final segment of today's video, but to also discuss some additional context behind some of the really high fees from last year. Obviously, when you're sacking Thomas Tuchel, hiring Graham Potter and then sacking him, that's going to cost a lot of money. Obviously, things like not getting the right type of commercial businesses in line and sorted out, obviously, is going to hurt us as well. Missing out on European football, that's going to hurt us. But these are the type of things that can only get better over time. And listen, if we can get a European spot this season, it's not even for the fact that, you know, we can generate a lot of money from playing in the Conference League or the Europa League, but it's for the fact that we can secure better commercial deals. Obviously, we know about this big one involving Air Jordan. They don't want to partner with us if we don't have European football. Ideally, it's the Champions League, but discussions will be held at the end of the season if we can guarantee some sort of European football, because we could be the long-term play for Air Jordan. Let's say the first year deal with us without Champions League football, they agree a smaller fee with us, but if we do get Champions League football, I'm sure there'll be conversations and discussions, of course, for that fee to rise in the future. So there's still a lot riding on what's happening at this football club. But to give you guys the final piece of context before we end things with the final segment of the video, it was also revealed that we held back 150 million from the purchasing price when the club was obviously bought from Roman Abramovich, in anticipation of any, you know, future actions and any future transgressions, any future issues that are coming from these investigations around, or the way we were bypassing FFP, essentially. So it goes on to really remind us again that these guys aren't idiots. Of course, they're billionaires, they're top dollar execs. Like, these guys know what they're doing, and they've safeguarded for the long term for any type of situation, so it gives us confidence. But I think right now, ultimately, it just comes down to what happens on the pitch now, and I think that is really between the sporting directors and our manager. So let's move on to the final segment. And Pochettino said in his press conference that he is calling for experience this summer. As he says, we need to bring in some experienced players this summer and also some more young players. That is all I'm talking about with the club and analysing, and to design the strategy for the next season and go fight for big things. I think this is common sense. This is absolute common sense, and credit to anyone that realized from the beginning of last summer that there was something wrong with this current strategy of just maybe over-investing in signing young players. But you know what, if I was to give you the best example of the unison and relationship between manager and sporting director, that would be Xabi Alonso and Simon Rolfs of Bayer Leverkusen, because they made some big changes to their squad. Of course, they accepted the sale of Moussa Diaby to Aston Villa for around 55 million. They released a lot of wingers, you know, Bellarabi. They didn't decide to sign Hudson-Odoi. They spent big money on players like Boniface and Xhaka as well. And they made very astute signings like the free transfer of Grimaldo, which is one of the signings of this season. And this only worked because Rolfs and Xabi Alonso worked together. Xabi detailed the needs he needed for his team for next season, the direction he wanted to take this team in, when it realized last season wing-backs were the way to go. So we have to commit to this style of football. We need the right type of players, personnels and profiles in this team. Hence why they spent big money on signing Boniface, you know, the platform striker to lead the line, to really elevate the team even more. And, you know, currently, as we've seen at our club, there's been a disconnect between the wills and demands of the sporting directors and the wills and needs of the manager. As we know, Pochettino only wanted 4 players last summer. He wanted to keep most of the players that we sold. You're looking at guys like your Mounts and many others as well. And he wanted to bring in experience. We were looking at guys like Rice, Lautaro Martinez, 3 to 4 guys that he could work alongside the conditions of the team he was set to take over. Because as we've seen with Poch, he always likes to focus on using homegrown talents. And obviously there were a lot of players at this club already. So when he inherited a squad that was full of differing profiles, what he needed, and with a lot of young players on top of that as well too, I guess it's no surprise that we suffered this season. Normally successful teams have that balance between experience, youth, you know, first team players, squad players. There's that healthy balance that, you know, creates a team that is ready to start fighting for things and challenging for honours, and we've done the complete opposite. So I definitely hope that we can take some inspiration now from a Bayer Leverkusen after they've just secured the Bundesliga title in a spectacular fashion, and they didn't do that by having to spend hundreds of millions. It was smart, astute working between all the right figures at the top. So this is kind of alluding to me that I think Victor Osimhen will be one of the main guys we definitely try to sign, because, you know, we want an experienced striker up front that can convert those chances and can bring a different mentality that you need to challenge. I mean, you're competing against guys on the field in 1v1 scenarios. Sometimes you got to be better than them, stronger than them, outthink them, and all those little aspects. And I think Victor and his movement and his winning mentality can definitely help give a lot of confidence to a young team like us. I'll ask you guys as well in the comment section, what other areas do you think we could add experience in? Do you think we might add one experienced midfield player? There's a lot of youth in that midfield. Maybe we add an experienced guy who's between maybe 24 to around 28 years old. Obviously, you're looking at defense with Silva going. That's like the granddad out of the team. But who do you sign to replace him? Do you sign another 20-year-old to do that? Is that the right direction to go in? I think this balance is needed, because otherwise we're not going to be the team we have to be. Because when you look at us, what team are we really? We're like a mess of ideas. And I think, listen, when you have a squad that isn't fully built towards one particular type of football to really maximize that type of football, right, you're going to hold issues. Now, under Thomas Tuchel, he inherited a squad that wasn't finely tuned or built, but because he's such a world-class coach, he found a system that incorporated, you know, the best qualities that he thought that team had. We were able to still compete. That was the benefit behind it. But the negative was, and this was the big issue, is that teams built this way or coached this way, they bottleneck eventually. They bottleneck eventually because you spent the past 2 years just competing without really necessarily working on key fundamental ideas. And I think maybe this is why his shelf life at clubs doesn't always tend to last as long. So with all the money that we've been spending on these young guys, I feel like to even get the best of our investments, we have to balance that with particular experience in this team as well too. But my friends, before I end things, let's discuss a few more key points from, you know, the press conference points. Before I end things, let's discuss a few things from the press conference. We also learned other things such as Pochettino admitting to the fact that if we were in Europe this season, we would be struggling. I mean, you guys are seeing the thought of all the injuries right now. We are injury FC. It's an incredible amount of injuries. As Poch is saying, you know, to play in Europe this season under our circumstances, oh my goodness, we've had 8 to 10 players unavailable every single game. If we add more games, we struggle a lot. And I think that is absolutely facts. Every time you've played games where there's a, you know, quick succession of fixtures in a short amount of time, we're not able to sustain that winning formula mentality. You know, it's very hard to do that if you're playing 2 games in a week, or sometimes even 3 games in a week. And, you know, to add even more context and more layers to this, a lot of guys we've signed, and let's see, Enzo Fernandez, a lot of these players, it's their first time playing in a Christmas fixture congested period. So because that's a new experience, it means that, do you have the know-how to be able to manage your physique, to play within such a tough period of the season, you know, to really manage your condition? It's hard. It's your first year here. So it's no surprise that a lot of players kind of started to dip in their form during that Christmas period. And to end things with the final point from the press conference, Poch discussed Chelsea youth, saying that it's going to take time for leaders to emerge. And I think that's facts, because we can discuss budding potential leaders. You're looking at Levi Colwill for sure. I would not be surprised if one day this guy becomes like the unanimous captain of this football club. Obviously, this is what happens with Reece James, but you know, he's a leader, I guess, in his own right. But we need other leaders in other positions. You know, the peak Chelsea teams that had your Drogbas, Lampards, and Coes. We didn't just have John Terry as the sole leader. We had those leaders across the squads, across certain positions, and we even saw that type of leadership in players. We saw like Jorginho, just for all the finger pointing and communication. He was constantly in communication with his teammates, and you need that, because we concede so many goals because we don't talk, we don't communicate, we get caught ball watching, and this is why we are weak as a team, not as individuals, but as a team. So I definitely agree with Pochettino here, and he gave the example of John Terry, saying that when John Terry was 18, 19, getting those loan spells in the Championship, you know, he wouldn't have been able to show the level that he did as he got more experience. And, you know, Poch made this point to temper expectations. And I think all of us, including myself, we've all felt victim to the expectations because of the transfer fees that we spent signing these guys. we had these expectations based on the aggressive nature in which we phase players out to bring these new guys here, because it communicates to us is that we've signed the better players, hence why we've spent more money for them. And the reality is that just has not been the case. And I like this John Terry example, because one of the reasons why John Terry became one of the greatest defenders in the history of the game was because he learned from your Desai's, he learned from your LeBuffs. They made him become something more than just like a tough tackling defender. They taught him how to think. They taught him how to orientate his body, how to move the ball. And for me, I think this is why John Terry is like one of the last Italian style defenders I've seen, which is the crazy thing, right? Based on how he plays, how he moves the ball, how he thinks, and just all those metrics. So, it's big expectations to place. Me, myself, I'm tempering them. And an example of that is Moises Caicedo. I think the guy is talented, but he's nowhere near being a world-class football player right now. There's too many, I don't want to say flaws, but there's too many things he can continue to work upon in his game to really fine-tune that to go to the next level. I think that's a more accurate way to describe him. And I think that's the case for many other players too. I'm looking at Enzo Fernandez. Number one, you've been in great shooting positions throughout the season, yet when you're connecting with your strikes, you're off balance, you haven't timed it properly, you're not getting them on target, or they're very weak shots a lot of times, and you can do a lot better than that. So, you're looking at a lot of the guys we've signed and you think to yourself, they need at least 2 years on top now to show what they can really do. And I guess to really accelerate that now, we're going to need some smart strategic planning now between Pochettino and our directors together. It has to be together now. If it's the same thing as it was last summer, then it's going to be even bigger issues for next season. So my friends, that is all the latest club news that has dropped. Share your thoughts and opinions. How are you feeling about things? And on that note, I'm the FC. This is BlueLionsTV. See you guys tonight. Cool.